and welcome to the State House and another edition of Montpelier Connection. This is Representative Mike Mrowicki from Putney. I represent the Windham District of Putney, Dummerston, and Westminster, and today's guest is Brattleboro's own Tristan Toleno.
Good morning. Yes, I represent the 3rd District in Brattleboro. I'm a new representative this year, serving in my first session.
Yeah. Well, we are deep in the thick of it here right now. Last week at the State House was the self-designated crossover date. That's the time for us to move bills from committee to the floor. This week we've been on the floor for quite a while trying to pass those bills so we can get them over to the Senate. Big bill on the floor last night. We were here till 9:30 debating the budget bill. Any thoughts on or surprises?
I wouldn't say there were any surprises. I will say that I was a supporter of an amendment, as I think you were, around reach-up benefits, which is sort of stirring up a lot of controversy right now within the House and presumably will in the Senate when it gets to them, and that has to do with a cap on lifetime benefits within the reach-up program that I do not support. And so that was a tough vote. I was hoping that we were going to get more support from people on that, on a change that would have held harmless people who are following all the rules, so that was a disappointment. But I think part of one of the first things you have to accept about being here is that you can't win everything you want, and that there are always opportunities to try to get back to something that's just not on the timetable that you think would be ideal.
Yeah, and this is something that's engendered a lot of debate in the committee I work on,
Yes, I think
House Human Services, and it's certainly been controversial. We've been trying to work a process here, and the process does go on, though, and we'll see how it continues. Wasn't the only thing we talked about yesterday?
It was not. It was a full day. I think it's hard to pick out. I mean, one of the natures of those big bill conversations is that there are so many details, and this first push to get it to the Senate is so fast that it seems to me that you really only have substantive debate as a whole body on a handful of items within those big bills, and that to a certain extent much of the committee work has been done to take on the smaller issues and kind of highlight what policy decisions have to be made prior to putting together that final draft of the budget. So.
The large I think the other side.
There are others that are interested in this. Looking at what the changes in spending patterns of Vermonters, so house sales and services and those kinds of taxes interact with income taxes, how the income taxes work with all of the different, what we call them tax expenditures. size as the upper tier tax rate of 9% roughly on the highest wage earners, but they never pay it because of the way that you've set up the rest of the program. There's no point in maintaining a 9%, which does get looked at by economists and by investors and by businesses looking to move into an area, not knowing whether they will or will not pay it. They look at that top tax rate and not the actual effective tax rate that people are paying. And the truth about Vermont income tax is that over a 30-year period we've averaged 3.08%, and it's been very steady. There's been very little change in the amount of the overall percentage of income that Vermonters pay on taxes. There have been other changes in the taxes. I don't want to imply that there aren't more taxes in other areas, but if the average is 3% and even the highest wage earners are averaging about 5.8%, and having tax rates that go from 6 to 9.5% that are never applied, there's no point. We're not doing the right thing with that. So we want to shift the way we tax so that we tax at a lower rate, but we tax more completely. And it has to do with sort of the structure of Vermont's competitiveness in the regional economy.
And Ways and Means did
to increase some spending in a couple of areas and to do it in a way that was strategically moving them sort of towards structural reform. The cloud computing tax debate that happened yesterday seemed to me to be in some ways on the wrong, like there was one side of the argument often seemed to be directed at something that wasn't actually true about the taxation plan. So there was some implication that it might hinder Vermont businesses. And the reality is that there are many large markets for cloud computing services that Vermont companies might choose to compete in with their own product, where they are likely to have to pay collect sales tax from those markets. We are not alone. We're not the first in the nation to do this. We're not going to be the last in the nation to do it. We're somewhere in the middle. And the reality is that for state legislatures around the country have been trying to grapple with how to tax things that have shifted from local sort of tangible good purchases to something that is streamed over the internet or ordered over the internet and delivered, and how to appropriately collect tax. And it's not been an easy problem to fix.
But this is the new reality we're in.
It's the new reality we're in, and the Vermont businesses need to be competing in an equal playing field, and that means partly that the government needs to be supporting its operations and the programs it delivers to make a competitive economy viable by taxing fairly too.
In your committee, agriculture, there's still talk of a GMO bill?
Well, we voted the GMO bill out, and it's in the Judiciary Committee, so when we did all of the preliminary work on this particular bill. We did all of the testimony and the findings in the bill about the testimony, and we did a lot of crafting of the legal language. And there are a couple of issues that Judiciary needs to review, and one of the real challenges of this particular piece of legislation, and it doesn't matter where it happens in any of the states where it might happen, there is an argument to be made in court about whether or not this is an inappropriate assertion of a state's role vis-a-vis the federal role in food labeling and safety. And so there's no clear bright line on this particular issue. There are reasons to think that Vermont could prevail in that argument. There's reasons to think that they could lose, and Judiciary has to sort of review it and decide whether they sort of concur with our strategy, which is we carved out a reason why we think that there's a legitimate state interest in this particular proposal. It would only affect people choosing to do business in Vermont. We're not trying to regulate beyond our borders, and we're not trying to discriminate against other states that choose to regulate these products differently. And those are key constitutional tests for the judiciary. We'll have a chance to review them.
Now, within the testimony you took and the research on this bill, is there a lot of research out there on?
The answer to that question is yes and no. There's increasingly large quantities of research. This is a significant business, and there are only a handful of players who are in this business, and they have a lot of money at stake, and they have a whole industry really of testing labs and scientists and farmers and other people who are all really dependent on the ongoing success of that industry. And so there's tremendous pressure on independent researchers who are trying to establish what does an independent protocol look like. How do we assess whether the claims that are made are accurate or not? And so there is more and more research. There are more and more possible lines of questioning. There's not probably enough. And in fact, we do not assert that the research definitively shows that GMO products are harmful. We assert that there is legitimate questions in key areas, and that because the science is uncertain, it is unfair. Not unfair, but it is. The federal government, through the FDA, has chosen not to regulate it, treat it as the same as traditionally grown foods. So they made that decision, and we're arguing that we have a substantial state interest in reviewing, letting customers decide that for themselves, given the fact that there are legitimate questions about whether the science is saying that it is conclusively safe. I apologize, I need a little bit more of that coffee.
Safety piece that came up.
that was a long-winded answer, but
Oh, it's a complicated situation.
it's a very complicated situation. There are no easy, quick sound bites on it.
So this is the time of year where we're sending stuff over to the Senate. The Senate's going to be sending stuff back to us. From both your Ag Committee position and in general, are you on the lookout for what's coming from the Senate?
Well, there are a couple things, 2 bills coming to our committee that I'm interested in. We have a bill, we're calling it industrial hemp, but the point being that it's about legalizing the growing of hemp for products like clothing and paper and things like that. So for industrial purposes, I guess, if not itself industrial, but it would be small-scale agriculture, but it would be for those purposes. And that is coming to us. It's been passed out of the Senate. There's a raw milk bill that takes a look at bringing raw milk sales for certain producers to farmers markets. That will come to us, and I'm interested in that. And then there's another bill that I think it's Senate 155, which is a workforce development bill that really calls for a study of our workforce development strategies and the design of something that's more of a strategic plan. And I'm very interested in that, although I'm somewhat skeptical of the language as I've seen it so far. And I think hopeful that on the House side it will go to Commerce, and that the Commerce Committee will sort of revisit the question of how we assess the effectiveness of our training programs. We spend quite a bit of money, and it's not clear that we know how or why to get the best outcomes.
Well, I thank you for your time
Thank
today.
you.
Just
teeing me up.
It's a busy time where we're just about ready to go back on the floor. It's early in the morning here. We were here late last night, but that's the nature of our schedule right now. So I do appreciate you